A species that never forgets sounds unstoppable. Every lecture retained, every warning remembered, every mistake archived forever. At first, that looks like the final upgrade for intelligence itself. But memory was never designed to be a flawless recording device. It was built to be useful, selective, even biased. So if humans suddenly gained perfect memory, the real question would not be how much smarter civilization becomes. It would be how long civilization stays sane. In that world, a child could recite a conversation from age 4, word for word. A surgeon could recall every page of every textbook ever studied. A voter could instantly retrieve every promise a politician ever made. There would be no fuzzy recollections, no half-remembered names, no walking into a room and forgetting why. Humanity would finally defeat one of its oldest frustrations. Unfortunately, that victory would open a door no one was ready for. Because forgetting is not just a bug in the human system, it is part of the operating system. Today, memory already feels like it is under renovation. Phones remember birthdays, cloud drives remember photos, search engines remember what people do not. Researchers at MIT have even built wearable AI memory assistants like Memoro, systems designed to capture conversations and retrieve details later through natural language. In other words, civilization is already moving toward searchable life. The difference is that the memory still lives outside the skull. For now, inside the brain, memory is much messier. Neuroscience has shown again and again that memory is reconstructive, not a perfect replay. The brain stores fragments, patterns, and emotional tags, then rebuilds the past on demand. That is why forgetting is so normal. It is also why false memories are possible. Even people with highly superior autobiographical memory, a rare condition that allows astonishing recall of personal events, are not immune to distortion. In one PANAS study, they still showed susceptibility to false memories and misinformation. So the closest thing humans have to supermemory still comes with glitches. That matters, because many people assume a perfect memory would simply turn the mind into a hard drive. But the brain is not trying to be a hard drive. It is trying to help a moving, vulnerable animal survive. A classic line of research on forgetting, from Ebbinghaus to modern sleep science, points to the same uncomfortable truth. The mind throws things away on purpose. During sleep, the brain does not merely strengthen memories. It also appears to prune and weaken the useless ones, reducing noise so important patterns can stand out. Forgetting, in other words, is not always failure. Sometimes it is maintenance. And there is another warning hiding in pathology. PTSD is in part a disorder of memories that refuse to stay in the past. Intrusive recollections can crash into the present with such force that the body reacts as if the danger is happening again. That is a clue. If memory became perfectly vivid, perfectly stable, and perfectly accessible for everyone, the benefits would be enormous, but the costs would not stay personal for long. The first months would feel miraculous. Schools would change almost overnight. Students would stop cramming because there would be nothing to cram. Read it once, keep it forever. Language learning would explode. Medical training, engineering, law, aviation, chemistry, history. Every field built on enormous bodies of knowledge would suddenly accelerate. Certification exams based on recall would look ancient, almost cruel, like forcing calculators to do long division by hand. Daily life would become sharper too. No more forgotten anniversaries. No more losing track of instructions, passwords, faces, or where the car was parked. Family histories would become living archives. Grandparents would no longer offer approximate stories about their youth. They would offer exact weather, exact phrases, exact expressions. Entire lineages would become orally searchable databases. And yet, the first hairline cracks would appear in the most ordinary places. Arguments would become impossible to escape. A casual disagreement over who said what on Tuesday at 7:14 p.m. would no longer dissolve into uncertainty. It would escalate into total replay. Relationships rely more on selective forgetting than people like to admit. The little irritations blur, the embarrassing moments fade, the badly phrased sentence softens with time. Remove that blur, and every marriage gains a courtroom archive. Workplaces would feel it next. One employee remembers every slight from every meeting. Another remembers every broken promise from management. A third remembers the exact sentence that excluded them from an opportunity 3 years earlier. Human resources departments would drown under cases powered by perfect recall. Ironically, justice would become easier to prove and harder to survive. That still would not be the biggest problem, because the human mind does not only remember facts, it remembers emotional charge. Very quickly, perfect memory would start reshaping the economy. Knowledge workers would become terrifyingly productive. A financial analyst could retain every quarterly report ever read. A lawyer could summon entire case histories mid-sentence. A programmer could recall architecture diagrams, documentation, and old bugs without searching a thing. Years of training in medicine, engineering, or policy could compress dramatically because the old bottleneck, losing information over time, would weaken. But labor markets do not reward everyone equally for a new superpower. They reward those who can monetize it first. Firms would race to recruit people whose recall translated into fewer mistakes, lower training costs, and faster execution. Entire industries built around memory support, test prep, note-taking software, tutoring for retention, some parts of publishing and search, would have to reinvent themselves. Education would undergo the same shock agriculture faced during mechanization. Not disappearance, but brutal restructuring. The deeper economic shift would come from behavior, not just productivity. Economists have found that people's lived experiences shape risk-taking for decades. Generations that live through poor market returns remain more cautious long afterward. Now imagine a world where those experiences never blur. Every recession, every bankruptcy, every panic at an ATM, every layoff email, every desperate meal budget during a downturn would remain crystal clear. Market psychology could become stickier, harsher, more path-dependent. A bad decade would not just scar a generation, it could lock one into caution, with almost mathematical precision. That would make economies more informed in one sense, and more emotionally rigid in another. Consumers would remember every time a brand failed them. Investors would remember every scam. Workers would remember every employer betrayal. Reputation would harden into something closer to geological strata. Trust, once lost, might not return on a human timescale. Now scale that beyond individuals. Corporations would start treating memory as infrastructure. Meetings would become more dangerous because nothing said in them could effectively disappear. Informal brainstorming would collapse under permanent recall. Creative risk often depends on the freedom to say the stupid version first. But in a world where every flawed idea remains perfectly retrievable forever, people may stop thinking out loud. Innovation could get more accurate and less adventurous. That is when governments would realize they were not just managing a cognitive revolution, they were inheriting a geopolitical weapon. States would gain citizens who can remember campaign speeches, police encounters, tax changes, military briefings leaked years earlier, and every contradiction in public office. On paper, that sounds like a golden age for accountability. Corruption becomes harder, propaganda becomes riskier. Historical denial becomes almost impossible when millions of witnesses can replay events with machine-like precision. But governments do not just want accurate citizens, they want governable ones. Perfect memory would make populations harder to manipulate, yes, but also harder to calm. National myths often survive because details decay and narratives simplify. If those details never fade, every country would be forced into permanent intimacy with its own hypocrisy. Truth commissions might become obsolete because there would be nothing left to uncover. At the same time, reconciliation would become far more difficult. Post-conflict societies depend on documentation, justice, and also a painful kind of managed forgetting. Not denial, Not amnesia, more like the gradual softening that allows neighbors to live next to each other again. Remove that softening, and old wounds remain politically radioactive. Intelligence agencies would adapt first. Espionage would become both easier and harder. Easier because a spy could memorize staggering amounts of information without carrying evidence. Harder because interrogation, witness analysis, and surveillance would become more potent on all sides. Diplomatic meetings would turn into battles between people who never forget a facial twitch, a phrasing change, a concealed threat. Nations would be negotiating not just against each other's interests, but against each other's flawless archives. And then there is war. Armies train soldiers to act under chaos, but they also depend on psychological recovery afterward. If battlefield memory became permanently vivid for every combatant, every medic, every civilian survivor, the mental health consequences could be catastrophic. Modern trauma research already shows how intrusive memories can trap the nervous system in recurring alarm. Now multiply that by millions. The world order would begin to split into two forces moving in opposite directions. On one side, perfect memory would be an engine of truth. Genocides could not be smudged into debate. Atrocities could not hide behind decaying witness accounts. Corrupt deals, environmental crimes, and political lies would face a public with forensic recall. Humanity might finally become too informed to be casually deceived. On the other side, global resentment would gain a permanent fuel source. Every nation carries historical injuries, borders redrawn by war, resources extracted under empire, broken treaties, famines worsened by policy, coups encouraged from abroad. In our world, these events remain powerful, but memory diffuses through textbooks, monuments, speeches, and selective education. In a perfect memory world, history would stop being interpreted and start being relived. International diplomacy would become emotionally denser. A delegate from one country would not just know that an insult happened decades ago. They would remember the room, the laughter, the wording, the sequence, the feeling. Global politics could become more honest and less forgiving at the same time. There would also be a strange cultural side effect. Entertainment, media, and advertising all rely on repetition because humans forget. If people remembered every ad after one exposure, marketing would become either radically efficient or almost useless. Propaganda would suffer the same paradox. One lie could destroy credibility forever, but one emotionally effective message could also remain lodged with terrifying persistence. Then the planet would discover the most dangerous twist of all. Perfect memory does not necessarily create perfect judgment. The central crisis would arrive not when people remember too little, but when they remember too much to think clearly. Human intelligence depends on compression. Experts do not win because they store more raw data than everyone else. They win because they chunk it, abstract it, and ignore irrelevant noise. Research on expertise, from chess to medicine, shows that mastery often depends on structured patterns, not total recall of every detail in isolation. Perfect memory could flood consciousness with detail so dense that abstraction starts to choke. The past would stop behaving like a map and start behaving like a warehouse. Every decision could trigger an avalanche of examples. Every social encounter could summon 1,000 prior microsignals. Every setback could drag a whole museum of similar pain behind it. Mental health systems would be crushed. Breakups would not fade. They would recur at full resolution. Grief would not soften on schedule. Humiliation from middle school could arrive with the texture of the floor and the smell of the room. Trauma would become not just a disorder affecting some people, but a design risk built into the species. Cities would change because of it. Subways filled with commuters wearing memory-dampening audio loops. Offices offering mandatory cognitive decompression rooms. Schools teaching children not how to remember, but how to survive remembering. A luxury market would emerge around forgetting technologies. Neural modulation clinics, pharmaceutical memory blurring, therapeutic sleep engineering, legal, right to mental opacity services. The richest people on Earth would pay not for more information, but for less access to it. And the social fabric would strain in ways almost comic at first, then terrifying. No politician could outlive a scandal. No celebrity could escape a mistake. No ordinary person could count on being forgiven for the worst sentence ever spoken in anger. The internet has already hinted at this problem by turning old posts into permanent reputational landmines. Perfect biological memory would bring that permanence into every human conversation. There would be no moving on, only managing recall. That is the point where humanity would finally understand something ancient and humiliating. Forgetting was never just mercy, it was scalability. So civilization would do what it always does when a breakthrough threatens to break the species. It would build systems around the flaw. Education would pivot first. Since memory is no longer scarce, schools would stop rewarding retention and start obsessing over interpretation, emotional regulation, model building, and judgment under overload. The smartest students would not be the ones who know the most. They would be the ones who can decide what not to use. Medicine and neuroscience would become the frontline industries of the century. Sleep labs would turn strategic. If sleep helps prune useless connections and maintain healthy cognition, then controlled forgetting would become a major public health project. New therapies might tag memories by emotional toxicity, relevance, or age, then soften retrieval intensity without deleting factual content. The goal would not be amnesia, it would be compression. Law would evolve too. A society with perfect witnesses sounds legally ideal, until every conflict contains infinite detail. Courts would need rules for relevance stronger than ever before. Privacy rights would expand from data protection into cognitive sovereignty. For the first time in history, people might demand legal limits on what they can be compelled to remember aloud. Workplaces would redesign communication. Some conversations would happen inside protected ephemeral zones, places where recording is banned and social norms discourage later retrieval unless harm occurs. That sounds absurd today, but then again, so did disappearing messages before permanent chat logs became normal. Culture would adapt in even stranger ways. New rituals of forgiveness would emerge, not as sentiment, but as infrastructure. Couples counseling, diplomacy, criminal justice, even urban design would revolve around one principle: memory must be organized, or society will drown in its own evidence. After a few turbulent generations, a new civilization would stabilize. It would be dazzling. Science would move faster, because fewer discoveries are lost between generations. Space missions could train crews with astonishing depth. Engineers building habitats on the Moon or Mars would carry decades of exact precedent in their heads. Cultural heritage would become almost indestructible because history would no longer depend so heavily on fragile archives. At the same time, this civilization would be profoundly different from our own in its emotional architecture. People would become curators of inner libraries, not just owners of minds. Whole professions would exist to help citizens index their lives, reduce cognitive clutter, and convert raw recollection into usable meaning. The elite might no longer be those with the best memory, because everyone has that. The elite would be those with the best filters. And the physical world would reflect that philosophy. Quiet rooms in airports designed for neural recovery. Public memorials built not to preserve facts, but to metabolize them. Political institutions with scheduled truth exposures and scheduled forgetting periods. Cities glowing with screens, satellites, and AI systems, yet organized around a very old human need, not just to know, but to keep knowing from becoming unbearable to Rosemary. So would perfect memory make humans better? In some ways, undeniably. Smarter, harder to deceive, less likely to repeat certain mistakes. But it might also reveal that civilization does not run on information alone. It runs on editing. A life is not just what happened. It is what the mind keeps, what it dims, what it reorders, and what it finally allows to become background. The same may be true for nations, and for humanity itself. If every triumph, betrayal, disaster, and humiliation stayed forever vivid, the species might become more accurate without becoming wiser. Because wisdom has never been the ability to store everything. It may be the ability to release enough of the past to build a future that is not trapped inside it. And that leaves one unsettling possibility. The most important reason humans conquered the planet may not be that they learned to remember. It may be that they learned, imperfectly and painfully, how to forget.